Casual Magic has been brought to you by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can get cool stuff. Use the code CASUAL for 5% off your order. We're also sponsored by Quiver Time, makers of the Quiver and Bolt deck cases and other fine card-holding accessories. Use the code CASUAL on their site for 10% off your purchase. And by Architect, a deck hosting website that doesn't sell anything, but they like me and I like them, so kindly use them for all your deck list needs. Now, on to the show. Hello and welcome to Casual Magic, the show where we talk about the fun side of Magic the Gathering. My name is Shivam Button. Casual Magic is brought to you by Cool Stuff Inc., Architect, and Quiver Time. Today, I have a very special guest, one of my dear friends, co-hosts of the Brainstorm Brewery podcast, and frankly, one of the best writers in coverage and in just magic. Honestly, probably one of the few of us who's actually got journalism training. Corbin Chosler. Hi, Corbin. How's it going?
It's going well. Hello. Thank you for having me on. Hello, everybody. I'm excited to get to come on the show. Obviously, we've been podcasting alongside each other for many years. And I think this might be my first Casual Magic appearance, so I'm excited.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited because I have known you for almost as long as I've been back into Magic. I've been following and reading your stuff. So
we've been at it for a while, haven't we?
When earlier this week, somebody told me Khans of Tarkir was 10 years old, and that's when I just died. And I was like, Khans is not that's a set that came out after. That's not a
Wow.
no, you can't tell me Khans is 10 years old. But here we are.
That was the first Pro Tour I covered in person too. So guess we have it in a minute.
Jeez, yeah. Isn't that wild to think about? It's been one of the biggest decades Magic has ever had, just in terms of because I've said this story before, but basically Xbox's Duels of the Planeswalkers brought all these people in. Yeah. Innistrad kept them in, and then from Innistrad through Theros through Khans was just the biggest on-ramp Magic has had until this year or something.
Yeah,
or last year's thing.
Back then is when OP organized play really blew up too, right? Those were the days of the 3,000 person Grand Prix, which they weren't really good experiences, but they were cool that they happened.
Hey man, every weekend I could turn on Twitch and there would be somebody in Omaha or Kita Kyushu just doing a Legacy Grand Prix or some garbage.
That was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I think because what happened is right around then, that's also when Twitch coverage of Magic really took off. Rich Hagon started really doing the thing, and it became huge, and it became just this all. And then, of course, as we all know, it all collapsed and everything died and went singularity. And now I think we're starting to crawl back. The Magic Cons have been amazing. The coverage and the Pro Tours have been amazing, and I think we're finally crawling back to the light, hopefully.
Well, it feels so it feels weird to say this, but it also feels weird to be optimistic and happy about Magic because so much of what we encounter,
we're not allowed to do that.
Exactly, right? So much of what we encounter is negative, and meanwhile I'm Modern's kind of great. 3-year standard, let's give it a shot. We've got Huey Jensen leading the charge here. I trust him. Let's go.
I think people are deeply underestimating how much value Huey is going to bring once those changes actually take effect. Because that dude knows. He knows what the Pro Tour is like and what it should be.
Everyone talks about, and I don't know how much of this is true, but everyone talks about some of the people who used to be employed at Wizards who were kind of stewards of the player experience or the Pro Tour experience. And it's really important to have somebody who is a strong advocate in that role who also gets it. And Huey's obviously one of the top 5 people in the world I picked to be in the position. So I just like to think that we're on an upward path here after obviously struggling through the COVID years. Dude, and people don't realize we didn't stop doing Pro Tours during the COVID years. We didn't call them Pro Tours, and they were online, and they were brutal.
They were things that existed.
To play.
They were not fun to watch, they were not fun to play, and I watched them anyways because I was so desperate for look, there was a point, like, watching and listening to coverage is kind of my, like, comfort spot, like, the
Yeah.
way our parents' generation would watch baseball games or golf tournaments on Sunday. I was like,
That's a great comparison. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm like, "Yeah, man, I'm mowing the lawn, listening to Cedric in my ears, just telling me about whatever legacy tournament's going on or something, or like modern. Who cares, right? Like, it was
Yeah.
just my comfort food. Like, this is like I'm doing my dad thing. I'm listening to my game. It's fine. And losing that, I didn't realize how big of an impact that would have on my life. Not having the just soothing tones of Marshall telling me about draft or whatever, right? Like,
Yeah.
it turns
Well,
out,
it's telling that somebody launched an account on Twitch um, at some point over the past year or two that just did nothing but stream old Grand Prix coverage,
yeah,
and it's 24. So that stream has not been turned off. It is 24/7, and it's been a huge hit. But also people saying what you're saying, just a lot of it's really nice to just go back and watch some 2017 modern,
right.
like,
Like, remember when
that's
Splinter Twin was the thing? Remember Birthing Pod? Remember they banned Birthing Pod because Siege Rhino?
I saw that. Yes.
Oh, RIP, Birthing Pod. You were gone too soon. But yeah, like, I don't know. It just sometimes it's like I go back and listen to old SCG coverage and I just throw on some random like 2013 like standard tournaments. Like, I don't even know. Like, great.
Yeah.
Tell me about like mono black devotion, please. I would love to know. Um, but how did you get involved in doing coverage?
Yeah. So I got into Magic in 2008, I guess, is probably so 15 years ago now. I first picked it up freshman year of college, and I was there for journalism. Um, I had dreams of wanting to go be on TV at ESPN when I was a kid. Then I later decided that I wanted to be behind the camera at ESPN, which was a much more practical decision and led to my journalism degree. But yeah, I got into Magic, and I watched coverage, and that was when, like you said, things were kind of getting going. And I had kind of gotten into the Magic content game, just trying to get myself out there. And I just kind of dipping my toes in. Um, so I just did something that I don't know if I obviously I got lucky. Everyone says right time, right place, but I wrote up a very long Google Doc breaking down the last Pro Tour of coverage with notes for the written coverage, which at that time was just a running blog, with
Yeah.
detailed notes for the video side of it. And I sent it off to Greg Collins, the director of coverage, in addition to
I'm sure
many
he
other
must have loved
things.
getting a note from an anonymous person saying, "Here's all the things you did
Well,
wrong."
they had snuck a line into an article announcing an event or something that was like, we might be looking to expand opportunities, something something. And I think I was one of maybe a couple people who reached out. Um, but yeah, that I got it. The response back was, "Yeah, everything is getting changed next year anyway, so nothing you've done is relevant. But we really like that you did it." So I got that. That led to me then. Oklahoma City, which is where I live, got its first ever Grand Prix with Theros, and that coincided perfectly with me kind of doing the do you like can you hack it trial run for them, and they typically like to do that when you're local to something so that they're
That
only
doesn't
on the
cost him
hook
anything.
for one day, it's safe, or blah blah blah, right? Yeah, so I did that, and I guess I did well enough and started getting trained and got onto the Grand Prix grind. And yeah, like Pro Tour Cons was the first time I got the call up to the Pro Tour. And then as
So, for
things
those
have
who
gone
don't
on,
know for those
yeah,
who
go
don't
ahead.
know, what do you actually do at a pro tour?
Yeah, so at a Pro Tour today, because
Actually,
it's
do me a
changed. Go
favor
ahead.
and move your mic a smidge because it is getting a
I got
little.
louder, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
Yeah.
Uh,
So, for those who don't know, can you tell me what you actually do at a pro tour?
Yeah, it's changed a lot over the years. When I first started, we were doing recaps in text of every match, and every round we'd have a feature match, we'd do one. So we'd have three writers and an editor and then photographer and all this stuff. And obviously, as technology got better and deck lists didn't have to be typed by all of us, which was a
God, what a
large need for
misery.
the power. Yeah, that we spent a lot of time typing deck lists, especially at the Grand Prix level. But yeah, so fast forward a bunch, we're in a much better position now. So now my position is kind of the the pro tour historian-ish role. I do all of the off-camera interviews
Hmm.
and recaps for the tournament, rounding up a lot of the information that goes into the highlights. I also am responsible for a lot of the behind-the-scenes sort of technical stuff for the broadcast in terms of getting the pairings in and picking the feature matches and deciding what the Magic viewers would like to see on TV, and putting that out there and doing so in a really tight turnaround, because what we are doing on the back end is producing live television, right? It's a show. So yeah, and then I at the end I write up I talk to the interview the finalists, talk to the winner, and I write the week that was, which is a weekly column on magic.gg
I
focusing
love
on
those articles. Never miss
organized
it.
play. Yeah, it's what got me into Magic, reading Brian David Marshall writing the week that was 15 years
Dude,
ago.
when I was younger, like, my goal was to be interviewed by BDM for one of those articles. Like, I was like, "I want
Yeah.
to whatever it takes, I wanna do that," and of course, I ended up going a different direction with my Magic career, but I got to interview him instead, so it's fine. Uh, but it's just like the week that was is just for years, even when I didn't read, like, wasn't into Magic, I would still read that article just to kinda keep my foot in the door. So I love that you brought it back because I think that's so important, especially now that tournaments are kind of starting to wind up a little bit more,
Hmm.
and we're starting to
Hmm.
see a little bit more between that and like Frank Karsten's "Here's the decks that did the thing"
Yes.
is like, oh, I remember when Magic was a weekly thing that mattered instead of just once
Hmm.
every quarter or whenever Commander stuff
And
updates.
and Frank's articles, I think you should go read the week that was, everybody. But what you should really do is go read Frank Carson's metagame mentor articles, because he has an entire Frank Carson. If you don't know, he's a Magic Pro Tour Hall of Famer. He
He's
has
a
a PhD
genius.
in math. Okay, so he knows what he's doing, and then he crunches more data than you or I are even aware is out there, and he every week is presenting win rates and all the information
Oh
you need to
yeah,
know for
percentages,
formats.
win
Yeah.
rates. I think honestly, he really just enjoys that, like, a lot. Like, because he writes these articles with the way that, like, some of us would approach that like, "Oh, we have to do our homework. Okay, we're gonna do the data
Right.
analysis."
Yeah.
No, Frank is like, "Oh my god, look at how many, like, greens on zeniths were in this modern pool." It's like, "There were 13% of all winning decks on day 1.5." It's like, "What the hell are kinda you doing?"
I
It's like,
love it. I love it. He just he we actually carved out a role for him at the Pro Tour. We don't need writers as much per se, but we do need a Frank Karsten.
"Oh,
And
yeah."
he just feeds the casters stats. He feeds us stats for the social.
Yeah, dude.
It's
Did you know that
amazing.
Reed Duke always wins on his 3rd day? Like, his 3rd match of every, day 2 of a tournament, Reed always wins when he is on the play with 3
Yeah.
cards, and it's like, "Okay, Carson." He's like a baseball. It's like listening to baseball with Carson. He's like he
Hmm.
just comes up with these random stats that you're like, "I didn't know I cared about that, but now I
Exactly.
really do."
He writes articles where you're like, exactly, I didn't know that I needed to know this, but
Yeah.
now I do.
Yeah, like, I think the article I keep going back to is, like, his explanation of a mana curve, where you
Yeah.
sit there and you're like, "Oh, I get it. This is how many lands I need to make this thing
Yeah.
happen."
And just has it
Wow.
very clearly laid out.
Yeah, and it's like, I would definitely like, during Strixhaven, I wish he had given a seminar. That would have been really cool.
Yeah. Well,
Anyways,
that's the beauty of having, and I want, I hope more people obviously see it. Look, we say the mothership, but the reality is there's daily MTG, which is what people were trained for 25 years to go to. And then there's magic.gg, which is where a lot of the competitive content lives these days. So yeah, it's kind of, we're still working,
it's
we're
really annoying that
almost a
they
year
separated
in.
that out.
Yeah. I don't know anything about it. I do know that it, it is, the SEO is kind of bad. Um,
It's that's an issue. I will bring that up with Blake sometime. I'm like, bro, you need to reintegrate this stuff. People go to one site. They're not going to go to two sites. It's not going
And the broken archive is my own pet peeve. But look, it's
let me tell
corporate
you
stuff, right?
let me tell you how many times that has ruined my day because I'm trying to find a specific thing that is
Hmm.
just vaporized for no
Well,
goddamn good reason.
yeah,
Text has no, it takes up no space. It takes up zero space. You can't
I
tell me that Wizard of the Coast can't afford 10 megabytes to host the archive, or, or
yeah,
if they were going to blast it, maybe tell someone and I will give you money and host it my goddamn self.
I know.
Mm,
It is my understanding that things are not gone forever. That maybe that like they just have that they exist the capability to bring them back. So we'll see. I've been somebody who saves everything I've written. I went to work
sure,
out of
same.
college for a newspaper covering sports in 2011, and I have every article I've written going back to then existing in a folder somewhere.
Every article I've ever written as a games journalist or in the capacity as a journalist, I have archives of both the
Yeah.
unedited and edited version because you never know when that's gonna somebody's gonna
Mm-hmm.
want to see something or whatever. And it's good practice to keep track. Like every podcast I've ever recorded, I've got a copy of. It's a thing you should keep.
Yeah.
Um, Space is cheap, people. But anyways, like how so because I know you've been sitting there, like I've seen you so many times, just like sitting at the actual Pro Tour,
Yeah.
like at the feature match. Left is like player A, player B, and then right in the middle is Corbin with a keyboard just typing away.
That's my cameo.
Like I feel like you've been on more feature matches than like anybody, short of.
That's my cameo, but we have too many people at the table now. I've given up that role to the table spotter, so now it's Fire Shoes who got to do it at the last PT. But yeah, it's always my favorite part. You get a now. I talk to the players beforehand, so I get the some of the interaction. But yeah, the table talk is always a nice thing to include in articles
Yeah,
and
it
stuff
brings
like
it to
that.
life.
Yeah, I
Like,
think so too.
but I mean, so tell me, like there was a time when you guys had to like record the play by play exactly, wasn't there? Like early on.
Yeah. Yeah, when I first started, um, they had just begun moving from the true play by play, like turn one player did this,
Yeah.
other player did this, life totals were this, next turn this, um, and writing that fast was like somewhat of an art form among the writers of the Grand Prix. Like, can you do this and stay sane? But when I had started, we had started moving towards a little more try to tell the story of the match and not just like a bulleted list of things that happened or whatever, right? And these days, we're much more into providing sort of a larger picture story of how what cards matter and how they what the games hinge on, because like when I write up a finals, it's a best of five, it goes 5 games. The games are red black evoke, aka Rakdos scam, and it's a million, like there's so many little things, but ultimately maybe 4 or 5 plays matter in a given game. So if you want to actually produce a document that's readable to people, yeah, I've learned to kind of build it out that way. But yeah,
Find the
I've
actual
been the
highlights and then pull them out.
yeah, and I've been kind of the not like the sole writer, but sort of the person who's writing all the recaps and everything now for maybe 5 years or so. So I've gotten pretty practiced at it, and I like to think there's some consistency, and
Yeah, you've got a
it's
voice. And
yeah
because you've got journalism training, you know how to write and you know how to tell a story. And it's
yeah
really important. Like how many times have we read written coverage where like the article writer spends 30 like 3 paragraphs 5 paragraphs writing about the ride that they took there, and then yeah, I played 6 rounds of modern, and then on the way back home Ari vomited into my cup. It's like, bro, this is not what I'm reading you for. I get it, it's nice to have life coverage, but please tell me about the event. you know I mean,
yeah
look, play by play is not as important as it used to be because we can actually watch the video.
right
In the early days, when we're reading an inquest or something,
hmm
knowing what happened on turn 3 of Bob Marr's like game mattered.
yeah yeah
Um, but I don't know. I think Also, Rakdos Scam is the most annoying deck I've ever seen. I hate that deck. I think it's really clever. I think it's really smart that somebody came
Yeah,
up with that. Also, that deck can go to hell and die.
that's fair.
Like
That's fair. That's
I
how I feel
hate.
about Tron.
Yeah, it's like it's. Well, look, I love me a Tron because I'm a Timmy and I want to ramp.
Uh,
But Rakdos Scam is just like, hey, guess what? You don't get to play Magic ever. And I'm like,
it's
it's a control deck and it
it's
sucks.
brutal. Yeah, it's
And
like
there's
New Jund, you
Yeah,
know.
and it's
Yeah,
exactly it's Greenless Jund is what that is. It's
yeah.
just instead of Liliana, it's Grief, and instead of Bolt, it's Fury, and Fury sucks, and I hate Fury. As an
Fury
elf,
is Fury, I think, is the biggest problem. I think endurance and subtlety, and maybe to a lesser extent solitude, but have been actively
eh,
very good for the format.
yeah, I
And I
think like
think
the
that,
green one's
yeah,
Endurance, that one's
yeah,
great. I think that's a
hmm
really interesting card. Solitude is fine, like Plowshares is always fine,
yeah.
but Fury, man, it just says, hey,
Fury's
guess
the
what? One drops, I mean, one
yeah.
toughness, GG's, get out.
Well, one toughness is dead with Bowmasters
Yeah, with
now.
Bowmaster.
Renin 6 was already like so. Wizards. What's interesting is that they seem to have recognized this. So Delighted Halfling, which we got
Halfling
in Lord of the Rings,
is
is
a
a
1/2.
1/2. So I think that the baseline for Mana Dorks moving forward is going to be 2 toughness, which makes Fury look a lot more fair when they're pitching a card and evoking a Fury to take 2 of your creatures. It's a 2 for 2 at that point. So I maybe we get to a world where Mana Dorks live in 2 and maybe even 3 toughness, and
Yeah,
they
but
kind of
my
bring it
elves
back.
deck is still just going to get
That's
completely obliterated.
that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, we need the 1/2 Land of War elves. You
Yeah, like
know.
give me a 1/2 Lana War or like a 1/2 Dwynen's Elite or whatever the hell.
Yeah.
Like, come on, this is yeah. I remember what Kibler said. Like somebody was like, "What do you want out of Modern Horizons 3?" And he's like, "Nobler Hierarch. Give me a noble Hierarch with 2 toughness instead of 1, please."
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, god damn it, I hate Fury and Grief. Like when they announced that set, I was just like, giving people free discard is going to be a problem, and this is I hate this. Why are
Yeah.
we doing this?
Like I said, I may be more positive on modern than most, in that I think the format has
Oh, I think the rest of the
less.
decks are really cool, but
Yeah, like it's all those cards have kind of like worked together to create the desired result for the format. But yeah, red black in particular just pits all the cards you hate playing against in
and
one shell.
and if you're playing any type of tribal deck or something, GG's because they've got that stupid plague engineer. It's like, why would you do that to me?
Yeah, or
I just want to
that
play
card.
elves. That's
That
all.
yeah, that's another reason things need 2 toughness now, right?
Yeah.
Like yeah.
I was like, look, if you're gonna let Fury exist, at least give me back Glimpse of Nature, please. Today and things that are never gonna happen. Um,
Yeah.
so then you've been doing coverage for a long time and you've been with the Pro Tour like group for a long time. That means
Mhm.
you've seen like a lot of changes through the eras, right? Like when you were starting, wasn't it still like Randy Bueller's like doing commentary and things like that?
Yeah, I was there for so I was there before Grand Prix coverage really existed. Is because there was a year, and maybe I don't know if it was 2015 or 2016, but we went from whatever we were doing before to every Grand Prix has coverage, and there's 35 Grand Prix, and
Mm-hmm.
that's when things really kicked off and got going. But I was there before that when we'd stroll in and start streaming occasionally in round. We'd start streaming in round four.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The casters are rolling in at 1 p.m. or whatever. Like it was a very different kind of world. So yeah, I've been through a lot, and then we hit our esports era, and I'm very fortunate to have survived in every role that I'm in, because as you know, anyone who in this space knows, everything's very volatile, and
Mm-hmm.
you go through gigs in a year or two, and you always pick up new gigs, and sometimes you go back to your old gigs. I had a
Yeah.
4-year hiatus from TCG Player, and now I'm writing columns there again. It's just how it goes in the industry.
I mean, the industry is very small, very small. Everybody knows everybody. If you make it wrong step with somebody, you're just hosed, right? But
Yeah,
like, yeah, like because I know that you must have been there when Marshall started. You must have been there when
right.
like all the real pro tour, like because coverage has gotten so much better than it used to be.
Yeah, Marshall was one of the people who really pioneered it, right? He was one of the first people who left their job, and that's just sort of the big thing for obviously a lot of Magic content creators is, is it enough to make this your job? And he was one of the first people to really blaze that trail in coverage. Obviously he has his other projects as well, but that
His
started, it
watch thing
helped
is
to,
going real well.
yeah, no kidding. But that helped to create a standard, right, and start to
Yeah.
level things up, and things have become more professional, over the years. And
Yeah.
I've also seen I've been through a lot of a casting team, right? Yeah, I mean,
Hmm.
when I started, Rashad Miller and Randy Bueller were still doing
Dude,
commentary.
I don't
And
think
now,
Rashad gets nearly enough credit for what he did to create
yeah,
Magic coverage.
Rashad's a legend, and he is very busy behind the camera
Yeah.
at the Pro Tours as well these days. But yeah, he made it all possible, grinding
Just
SCG
yeah, dragging his own
qualifiers.
cameras.
Yeah, not even is before the Open. He was grinding qualifiers with his own set of cameras with GG's Live.
You can still see some of those on YouTube, and they're rad, but it's like
Yeah,
wild. It's wild to think of like basically doing pocket coverage just for giggles,
yeah.
basically, right? Like,
Well, yeah, and it's full circle, because rogue coverage was kind of the thing over the last few years,
oh yeah.
with coverage getting cut everywhere. There was one very awkward event a few years ago where I was like hired to do coverage and then unhired because they didn't have a coverage
Oh
budget at the end,
right.
which led to me crowdsourcing it because I was so mad. Like, it's a whole thing.
I remember that. Like, I was like, "What do you mean you're just like undercover covering the event? What the hell's going?"
Rogue coverage popped up, and that became a thing. And you know what? Hey, shout out to Anurag Das, who kind of innovated that in
Yeah,
this
he still does
era.
that stuff, man.
And now he's streaming, working with the DreamHack coverage. So
But I mean,
um,
it's like between Anua and like Corey Baumeister doing his backpack streams randomly at like events. I'm like, look, I respect it. I think it's awesome because it gives me something to watch. But also, this is weird as hell.
yeah, I do. It is a poor replacement. Obviously, no offense to anybody, but even
No, it's like, what are you gonna
remote
do? This
remote casters, which is another thing that's almost become standard because of how much money you save, it's just such a decrease in quality
it's
from
hard.
where we used to be.
It's hard to do remote cover, like because remote cover, they're still watching the same stream we are, and then
Yeah,
they don't
it's
have the
just
same kind of like
they got
insight.
to manufacture hype in their bedroom by themselves. Like it's
I mean, look, I appreciate at least that they're trying,
yeah,
but it's
yeah.
just like this is.
Well, and I get it. And if you're one of the tournament series where your option is do this or don't have it at all,
I'll
obviously
take
it's an
this,
easy
right?
choice, right? So,
Yeah, like anything that gives me coverage, I will take. I just wish that Wizard would appreciate that I need this in my life.
yeah, I would say, well, I think I'm very fortunate to still be involved. I came into Magic into Magic coverage specifically with the goal that I think has kind of always been the goal, but has been difficult for them to realize, which was I want to tell the story of the players. I want our players to be humans, not just deck lists. Um, and that was my big thing. And obviously, my niche is kind of human interest stories, right? I'm not going to grind numbers like Frank is, but I have been writing for a long time, and have before, like, in a different life before Magic, I was covering government and city council and natural disasters and all of those sort of normal journalism things. And so
One of
yeah,
the yeah. Go ahead.
so I think I came into Magic with a wide range and sort of a different focus than I think many people who came in with a Magic centric angle, which is one of the reasons I think that I've been able to, to hang,
Say
hang around for so long in coverage, but also one of the things that I think coverage as a whole has improved at vastly.
one of my favorite stories that you've ever written was the one you did about God, who that what was his name? The kid who's the burn player whose mom helps him hold.
Brandon Burden.
Yeah. You wrote like, he's got like motor difficulties and
Hmm.
has like a real hard time actually, playing. And so his mom sits
Hmm.
there and comes and holds the cards and he points and she does the mechanical part of the playing the Magic. And I was like, this is the kind of storytelling I want. I want to know who we are. That's why I do this damn podcast. Because
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah,
look, I know there's a million ways that can tell me what the best matchup is. Like,
right,
there's a million people out there who will tell me what your sideboard is, but I want to know who is holding those cards and making those decisions. And I think
yeah.
that those stories that you've done have been some of the just my favorite ones to read.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I love telling those stories, and it's hard to say. I want to make sure I phrase that right because oftentimes the things that I'm most proud of writing tend to be very sad
Yes.
circumstances. But
They are definitely not like the happiest of things.
yeah,
No,
but
that's journalism.
that's always been my thing. Like going back to college, I wrote an editorial and it made my journalism professor because I was the editor of the newspaper at college, right? So I had to put out content every week, right? But I wrote an editorial about someone who had passed that I made my professor cry, and I was like, ever since then, it's kind of been the niche.
Yeah, but I mean, like at the same time, you also give us human interest stories about like Dana, and it's wild because I've known Dana since she was 6, and she's 13 now, and that's
Yeah,
really weird to me.
yeah.
Like what? But I don't know. I mean, I think that there's so much room that we have not explored in Magic because of just the nature of coverage and the nature of who's paying and the nature of what they want. That
Hmm.
we have like video game journalism got to a certain point where we were able to do things like explore the feelings that these cards give us or these games give us, explore who these makers are or what the premises are, well, like the stories behind the stories. And
Hmm.
I want to see more of that in like the tabletop space, but it's really hard because it's so tiny that even getting just coverage of the fact that games happened at all is so hard.
Yeah.
So when you get the chance to write one of these stories, it makes me real happy because I'm like, there's somebody else who's actually holding the torch and doing the work.
Well, and that's why the week that was is so important to me because we don't have a bunch of writers of the Pro Tour anymore. The Brandon Burton story was amazing because he was doing well at that tournament. I went and talked to him and I pounded that story out in 2 hours, 2.5 hours, sitting at my desk while the Pro Tour was going on. All right. I told my editor, "Hey, can I like trade off on the feature round recap for next round? Like, I'm gonna write this." I just put on headphones and wrote for 2 hours, and it come out on the other side of that. It gets published quickly, and we were able to put it out. The broadcast team is able to talk about it on air, direct people there as Brandon Burton is playing in important matches on day 2. Right, that's the sort of thing that you can't make that sort of thing where all the circumstances just come together.
Exactly.
Yeah, and there's not as much space for that in written form at the Pro Tour these days. But there is the week that was, and I get it. I've covered a lot of cool stuff there, and I'm enjoying that.
Yeah.
I got to talk to Christian Calcano, who went on to the finals of the Pro Tour a few weeks earlier, and interview him for the week that was about his wild
That weird Athens
trip
trip that
vacation
he
to
had to,
Europe.
like,
Yeah.
cause I remember he went to like Italy to go hang out with Mengu and friends, and then
Hmm.
suddenly he's flying out to Athens to play in like
Yep.
the European
Yeah,
regionals
they
or
took
some
him.
crap.
He went out there to hang out with them. They took him to an event. He played side events. He happened to qualify for the RC, so he had to go back and play the regional
Grinder's gonna
championship.
grind, baby.
He happened to qualify at the regional championship for the Pro Tour, and that Pro Tour happened to be in Barcelona. So back to Europe he goes, 3 for 3,
At least,
finals of the top 8, and it's so neat because we got to talk to him before any of that happened. You know.
yeah, and I'm sure at the end of it he was just like, "So nice seeing you here again."
Yeah. Yeah, so those it's so cool
So
to have
tell me,
that
man,
opportunity.
how rad was it to be able to talk to Reed Duke though after like he won in Philly, right?
Yeah, and so for people who I've talked to Reed Duke about winning an event a dozen times over the years, right? We've had many conversations, and his thing was always, he had his near misses at Worlds, and he couldn't get that final, like the trophy or the that he was looking for. So for me, seeing him get something like that and accomplish it, same with like Nathan Stoyer,
Mm,
um, that's a really cool and happy moment for me personally as well as professionally, right?
yeah.
We're we're not in some super hard nosed, gritty industry where I have to treat everyone as a subject, blah, 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 right? Like most of the people on the Pro Tour are great people and good human beings. And I'm really happy when they do well. So, yeah, I've seen Reed finally get sort of the final thing left for him now is a individual world championship title.
Right. But
So, but
that's a
it
little
was
bit
great to
that's a
see him
little
get
harder
that.
to that's
Yeah.
gonna be a little bit harder nut to crack.
Yeah.
I mean, it's wild when you sit there and you're like, "Bro, you're a Hall of Famer. How do you still have goals?" And it's like, "Well."
Yeah. Yeah. And that is something. And that's actually a really interesting one of the articles I wrote some number of years ago. That I'm proud of this line. I want to see if I can get it right here because I think the article has been lost to the uh,
The
you know
ether.
recesses of the internet. Um, it was not many people know what it's like to get to the top of the mountain and have nowhere to go but down. So it was an article about Simon Nielsen. I'm sorry, Simon Gortson, uh, who had won the Pro Tour, as some sort of a wonderkind, and then really struggled after that mentally. And he ended up finding sort of new purpose in doing coverage, which he did for a long time
Yeah.
up until COVID. Um, but yeah, I thought that was a sort of a really interesting thing. Is that these players they have to find a way to stay motivated, right? So much of Magic is mental. The grind to be up and just jam the 1,000 matches you have to get in before a Pro Tour. That takes a lot of discipline, and it's really easy, especially after you've won or you've been successful, to slack off there, right? So
Yeah.
that's what makes it really all the more impressive. People who show up and have a great event and win. Obviously, that's amazing,
Well,
right?
that's
But the
why I
people who
like
do it over and over and over again, it's just a different tier.
that's why I look at like folks like Kai Buddha or Finkel who are just like, "Oh, huh, Pro Tours in the neighborhood. I guess I'll just go. Oh, I guess
Yeah.
I'll just top 8 again. Sure, why not?" Like what? Like are you are you kidding me?
So hey, another side benefit of the week that was here, I'm gonna have to claim all the credit I can get here. Willie Edel qualified for the World Championship on match points, which is another feature of the Pro Tour we've brought back. That there's a rolling set of match points based on your Pro Tour, your previous Pro Tours, that can qualify you for future ones. To try to get a little bit of the train going, right? The
Mm.
qualification where people can start chaining them. Um, so I think when I was interviewing people for a week I broke the news to Willie Edel that he was actually in the race for Worlds, and he was like, "Oh, now after you mentioned that to me, and I look, it appears I am in the race for Worlds." And then I talked to him about his preparation, but I also talked to Kai and asked Kai about Nathan Sawyer's on this pretty epic run, blah 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 blah. Like, how do you think it matches up? And Kai's like, Kai's great. He says, "Oh, it's way harder now. I can't really compare it." He's super humble. But then Kai shows up at the Pro Tour and top eights. I'm just saying, maybe I lit a fire under his butt. That's
Yeah,
all.
maybe he just like, "Oh, wait a second, kid. I'm still Kai Buddha."
Yeah, just it's
Still the greatest of all
just a great
time.
storyline. Just a great storyline.
Yeah, and it was so funny though watching him play. Like you would see his expressions, and he would just be like laughing at how silly this whole thing is. Like he's
Yeah.
sitting up there, like, "Oh, look, I'm at top 8 again."
Yeah. He's top eighted a Pro Tour in 4 different decades.
How insane is that? In any sport, are you for real?
Yeah,
Like,
that's like a Vince Carter type stat in the
yeah.
NBA.
I mean, I remember when BDM was once saying like, "Yeah, Finkel has gotten the Hall of Fame like qualification stats 3 separate times." Like
Yes,
he could
yes,
qualify for the Hall of Fame at any given chunk of his career. Like, what the hell are you talking about?
yeah, yeah.
And I don't know, I guess players like that just don't exist anymore. But then you've got wonderkids like Stoyer and like just like what are you doing, man? This
Stoyer
dude's on a
has 3
tear.
titles, and no one else. I'm sorry, Stoyer has 4 individual titles. Um, Kai has 8. No one else before Stoyer ever had more than 3.
What, not even like PV?
Nope.
What? That's crazy.
He has 3 individual titles, and it just makes you realize how much of a class of his own Kai was, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Kai is. I mean, look, dude. everybody's like, yeah, well, some of his were team games. I'm like, no, those team games were Kai and then two guys who were also there, right? Let's be real.
Exactly. Yes.
It's
Yeah.
like,
So for people who are curious, I'm sorry. Kai has 7 first place. Nathan has 4. PV Finkel, Seth Manfield, Jan Moritz Merkel, Dirk Babarowski
Rocky.
all have 3. But people like, just some of the people who I would consider, in that top 5 Magic players ever list, Nassif,
Yeah.
Shota, like
I don't think,
Reed
has
Duke.
Shota ever
They have
won?
2.
Oh, Shota has one. Okay. Like
Yeah.
I love watching him play, but he's just
Yeah.
so terrifying. Like you sit against him and you're like, I'm gonna lose this game just automatically because he's just gonna burn a hole through my soul.
Yeah, Shota's amazing. See,
Man.
and there's so many great personalities on the Pro Tour, and look,
So,
I love Commander. I have 12 Commander decks. I talk about Commander every week in my podcast. I write about Commander every week in my TCG
so do
articles.
I.
Yeah, we all love Commander, and I also feel like there's a lot of cool stories on the Pro Tour that I hope are going to get an opportunity to shine in this.
Yeah, people always like look at me
This
like,
new era.
Shivam, you're on the CAG and you're like a podcaster and you're all Commander all the time. Why do you care so much about the Pro Tour? I'm like, because Commander is what I do, but the Pro Tour is what I enjoy. Like
Yeah,
I mean, I will never play the Pro Tour and I'm not a competitive player by nature. I don't want to grind for that. But watching the Pro Tour is some of my favorite thing in the world, right? Like it was like I was telling somebody in Minnesota, I would sit there or like in Philadelphia, I was going around and I'd just be like, you know, what do they call it? Like birding the matches in
yeah,
the Pro Tour, and
yeah.
I'd be like, "Oh my god, that's LSV playing! Holy crap!" Like I went to college with LSV for God's sakes, but like I'd be sitting there like, "Holy crap, that's like
That's LSV at the
Shota,
Pro Tour,
right?" The Pro Tour
Yeah.
LSV, or like any of these other things. I'm like, "Oh my god, I've seen this guy on coverage a million times," and I'd just be like, "Hi, I'm Shivam. It's so nice to meet you." And then 10 seconds later, I would walk out the door, and I'd be like mega celebrity because I'm Mr. Big Content Creator guy, and I'm like, you guys don't understand. If I turn around back there, I'm just like a fangirl again. It's just silly.
I want to see. Absolutely love that. People who bridge that gap, right? You
Mm.
bridge that gap. Rebel is somebody who's dipped their toes into competitive play
Oh
and
yeah.
helped introduce people to it as well. And
The fact that
I would love to see more overlap because a rising tide does lift all boats, and
I think
these Magic Cons are an amazing opportunity for the Pro Tour to be right there alongside all the other really cool stuff going on.
the first time I met Frank Karsten in Philadelphia, I was like, man, this Pro Tour side is way different than the MagicCon, isn't it? And he's like, yeah, I went down there and I saw like Commando live, and there aren't people chanting my name at the Pro Tour. And I'm like, we should change that. But you know what though? It's just like I think it's important for folks to remember that we're all Magic players. We're not just players of X or Y. And
Yeah.
like a lot of time competitive grinders or like casual grinders or whatever will get all up in each other's business being like, oh, look at that try hard. Like, dude, we play the same damn cards. Chill out and enjoy the game. It's fine. Like it's all fine. Relax. Have you had much trouble like trying to talk to like some of the foreign or like non-English speaking like Magic Pro Tour folks? Or do they have like
um,
translators that come with them?
Well, so what's interesting is I've experienced that a lot more in other games.
Mm.
I did Overwatch and Call of Duty League content for Blizzard for a few years, and I had to use the team translators quite a bit whenever I was talking to a lot of Overwatch players or
A
like
lot of Koreans.
um, yeah, like at like league event NA finals last year. There were several translators there for us. But in Magic, I actually have a pretty good relationship with a handful of the Japanese players who we've got. They forgive whatever translator I use, and I make sure that whatever I put from them is something that they meant to say. And I think have a pretty good line to a couple of them in person. There's if they don't speak English, great. There's usually one of the friends, somebody in the friend group or play group will be able. Also at the Pro Tour, the actual judge staff is always staffed with people who are
Mm,
fluent in the languages of anyone who will be there.
sure. It's like I speak pretty good Spanish and pretty good Japanese, but I don't speak magic Spanish or magic Japanese. So it's like
Yeah,
It's hard to communicate in their language when I'm like,
I
I don't
wish
know
I
the
could
word for
speak into
tap.
Japanese. That sounds amazing.
Well, I lived there for a year, so it's kind of cheating.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like it's always funny though because I'm like, oh my god, it's like I was at the airport in Mini and I was like, turn around and I'm hanging out with EK, my producer,
Uh-huh.
and I turn around, I'm like, holy, that's Shota Yasaoka, and he's like, are you gonna go say hi? I'm like, hell no, I'm not gonna say hi. Are you kidding? He just got off a plane from Tokyo. I'm not gonna bother
Yeah.
him right
Yeah.
now. I really, really wanted to though. That would have been a great first impression. Like, oh my god, I'm your biggest fan. And, yeah, it's like, man, Pro Tour
Welcome.
Kaladesh was
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah.
It's true.
Dude, oh god, Pro Tour Kaladesh though, man, that control mirror. Watching somebody like I hate
Carlos Ramal, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, I hate control magic. I hate control decks more than anything in the world, unless a pro is playing it. Because then I'm like, oh, this is art. This is
If
actually
it's
just
yeah.
amazing.
And what that match, yeah, I remember sitting at the table next to that one, just typing away. Nothing happening. Next turn, nothing. Who's got? I was just counting land drops. I was just counting up the lands on each side, waiting to see who was going to miss one
Oh,
first.
were you at the Sifka game? Well, though the eggs one?
Eggs, I was not. I
Oh,
was
you're
not at that
lucky, man.
one.
Can you imagine trying to record that play by play?
Oh, God. The
38 minutes
worst
later,
one,
nothing happened.
that would be rough. The worst one I've ever done, there's probably two in the running. The Marcio Carvalho Brian Brown doing World's Final, which was the Bant Company standard mirror best of 5.
Oh,
It
like
went like 4
forever.
hours or something. Both players had to take bathroom breaks.
Oh yeah, it was like a
Like it was a
misery.
disaster. But also the World Magic Cup team finals that was Sidisi the Brood Tyrant mirrors
Oh Jesus.
with Whip of Erebos.
Oh yeah, I
So
love those decks.
it was just, whipping out a million things. Everyone has a billion life and Hornet Queen tokens. And
And like somewhere, Mark Rosewater's just fuming at Hornet Queen existing at all. And like, bro,
true.
I remember I saw a picture from one of those events where it's like, PV just whips back a Hornet Queen, and then you just see Rosewater in the background, just like glaring, like
Yeah.
he's so pissed.
That whip format was rough.
Oh god,
Yeah.
I mean, I loved it, but it was
Oof.
miserable to play. Actually,
Yeah.
I think the worst of that was Yvonne Flock's control deck with the
Yep.
Sphinx's
Magic
Revelation, and like the sheep and everything. It's just like, oh god.
Magic 2015 Pro Tour, I believe. He won with no win conditions in the deck,
Yeah,
right?
just his win was,
Elixir of Immortality.
yeah,
Yep.
just living.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just,
The Elixir of Immortality loop the graveyard was the win condition.
yeah, and it's just like, wow, this is also a thing Magic can do. Let's never do that
That's
again.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that was fun. Yeah. One of those things that I'm glad happened in retrospect, right?
Yeah.
Were I there, I would be enormously pissed that my Sunday was going way longer than it needed to. Like, let's get out of here. Let's get to the staff party. Let's get to the bar. Come on. What are you doing?
That said, though, like, I mean, I don't know. I think it's always awesome when you see these weirdo, innovative decks just show up. And I think my favorite was still Pro Tour Eldritch Moon, which ended up being Liliana versus versus the Eldrazi, which was exactly the story. But for the first time
Yeah.
ever, the story and the game actually synced up in the Pro Tour, and I was like, "This is the best I could ask for."
Yeah.
Um, so I have to ask you though, how the hell do you, Mr. Coverage and Journalism guy, get into a finance podcast? Like what?
Well, that's easy to explain. I was broke. So when I started playing Magic in college, I was in college on a scholarship, which fortunately covered most of my things, but I did not have a lot of like support or spending money. So I was, a broke college kid trying to afford Magic. And the natural like solution there is brewing up budget decks. And once you start talking about budget, you start talking about um, the financial side of the game. And back then, trading was a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I started following a little website called
Quiet speculation.
Before I wrote, it was called Doubling Season. Before that, I wrote my first article for doublingseason.com.
Doubling season.
Yeah, this is a real blast from the past stuff here, but this was when Pack to Power was sort of taking off, when Jonathan Medina was doing it. And this whole Magic finance thing, and the smartphones became a thing, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I was a broke college student, so I got interested in sort of the financial side of the game and how to compete against $50 Baneslayers,
Mm-hmm.
which led to me writing, finance articles about how I, was managing my stuff on my collection on a budget, which led to somebody saying on Twitter, so there should be a finance podcast, and then people tagging me and a couple other people, and I don't 600 episodes later or whatever,
Jesus
here I
Christ.
am. I don't know.
Like, I forget how, I mean, brewery's been around for so long. Like, I've listened to so many episodes. After a while, though, I'm like, you guys are my friends, and I'm tired of listening to you talk to each
I
other.
get
So
it.
I'm just
I
going to
get it. Trust me.
I'm like, I would rather just keep you as my friends than just listen to you guys be angry at each other for an hour.
And I got into, so I edit articles for Original Magic Art and for Cool Stuff Inc. every week. So I see and write a lot of content. So I'm kind of this, I don't want to listen to my own podcast. I don't want to read my own articles. I take in magic content when I can, but I'm not quite the
Well,
consumer of it I used to be when it was purely a hobby.
when you get to a certain tier of content creation, all of your time is going into content creation, and it's
That's a
hard
good way to put
to
it. Yeah.
like listen to other people's stuff because you've got this dual issue of A, I don't have the time, and B, I don't want to inadvertently step on your toes or take your thing or subliminally copy you. Like I would
That's a good
talk,
point.
like one of my good friends, Margaret Weiss, she's a author. She writes a lot of Dragonlance novels,
Mhm.
and I used to talk to her. I'm like, so what are your favorite books to read? She's like, I read a lot of Charles Dickens and stuff. I'm like, do you read any modern fantasy novels? She's like, absolutely not. I don't want to get I don't want somebody else's voice in my head,
Yeah,
and I don't want to accidentally like take someone's ideas or anything. And I'm like, oh, that's actually a problem for you as a real published writer.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why most of the podcasts I listen to are about like food or politics.
Yeah.
Cause it's like,
Well, that's why I take a lot of I watch a lot of sports, I guess, right?
mm,
So I'm very big in, like, I never got out of that phase of my life, right? I still live sports just like I did. And it's just, but when I was working in sports, I did not enjoy sports as much,
well,
which
yeah.
kind of sucked. It was like a hobby that was taken away from me because I was at, football games 3 nights a week and blah, blah, blah.
God,
So
dude, let me tell you, I worked in the video games industry for 10 years. Video games were my hobby and my passion and my favorite thing to do.
yeah,
You know, the last goddamn thing I want to do when I come home from a 13-hour day or whatever is play a
yeah,
video
man.
game.
Yeah.
Like,
And that sucks,
yeah, for like a
you know?
decade, I just couldn't game because I was like, it would look like work to me. It would be like,
Yep.
oh, look, it's just more stream. Like that's why whenever like I see a bunch of like people who like play Magic on stream all the time, and I'm like, hey, let's hang out or something, and we're hanging out. Someone's like, oh, did you guys play Magic? I'm like, hell no, we didn't play Magic. Like that's
Yeah.
his day job. He doesn't want to play Magic on, like because there's the content creators guilt, right? Where you're like, oh, I could be recording
True.
this.
True.
And it's like, if we're playing a board game, you can't because that's not Magic. Nobody cares.
That's a good point. Yeah.
We can play
Well,
something else.
I watch a lot of sports, and I try to take, um, I don't. I guess my sort of long term goal here is to, like, if I'm happy doing what I'm doing. I'm not trying to, um, land a different role or anything, right? But I do want to work on my hosting abilities, both for the podcast and for anything else, any other streams or anything I step in on. So I watch a lot of sports shows and try to take a lot of cues from what I think are the better hosts of debate shows or that sort of thing. But yeah, magic wise, I don't I you're that's a great point about not stepping, not cribbing anyone else's content on accident.
Yeah, it's like that's one of the real reasons that I do an interview show because nobody can say like, "Oh man, you stole my stuff." I'm like, bro, it's a conversation. It changes every week. It's like
Yeah.
it's different every time. But you know what, man? This has been a lot of fun, and I really appreciate it because, like I said, we've known each other for a very long time, and I've been a fan of yours for a very long time, just because you write the stuff that I want to read. So I'm glad that the situations have come back around to let you keep doing this. Like,
Yeah, well, man, thank you so much for having me on the show and giving me the platform to talk about the Pro Tour. I could talk about it for a very long time, so I appreciate it.
yeah, are you going to be at Vegas?
I will be.
Oh,
World
sweet.
Championship coming at Vegas. It's gonna be a blast.
Oh
That is,
wait, World is going to be at Vegas.
oh yeah.
Oh man.
And so the cool thing they've started doing at the shows is on Sunday afternoons, the main stage they put the Pro Tour top 8 up on the screen, and they have a host doing crowd work, engaging everyone with it, truly making it a part of the con experience, which is neat.
Oh, I'm stoked. I'm
Yeah.
super excited for that. Okay, man. But if people wanted to find you or your stuff, where could they go?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me generally on Twitter at Chosler. You can find my articles the week that was on magic.gg every Friday. Those are the two things I probably want to direct you to.
Cool. All right. And as always, my friends, you can find me at Gearpuri Gears. You can find this podcast anywhere podcasts are sold, or at Cool Stuff Inc. on Tuesdays, or at YouTube on Tuesdays, thanks to my editor, EK. You can also find me on the Chronicles of Dragonlance podcast, or Shivam and Wheeler Love Magic, both of which come out eventually. And remember, my friends, it's not magic without the gathering, and we will see you next time.